and good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. Welcome to the second day of TAO Days. I hope you all had a fantastic day yesterday, and I hope you are as excited as me to dive into today's sessions. So let me first share my screen to kick off with the presentation. There we go. So we are here to explore the latest innovations that TAO has introduced, and also to give you a sneak peek at what's coming to the future of our product. I will go also through some of the things that we have done since our last TAO Days last year in summer, but also go through some of the things that we are preparing for the future. Some of them will actually come out really soon to our platform. So feel free to also ask questions or share your thoughts during the session, and hopefully we will have some time at the end of the session to go through those. And yeah, stay tuned and get ready for what's coming to TAO. And what better way to start talking about what the future holds than first looking back a bit to some of the exciting new things that we have done, as I said, since our last TAO Days. So basically, in the last year that passed since our last TAO Days. One of the most exciting things that we have done is to release our newest product in the TAO suite, which is called TAO Portal. It was introduced last summer, and right now, at this point, is used by most of our cloud users. What TAO Portal is, it's the main test administration module. It allows user management, it allows rostering, session management. For those of you that are knowledgeable in TAO and who have used TAO 3.x so far, it's also a replacement for TAO 3.x in terms of doing the administration of all the assessments. What we have tried to do with TAO Portal is to completely overhaul the user experience to make it more user-friendly, even for non-professionals. We wanted to minimize the friction when managing assessments in all sizes and forms, starting from classrooms up until larger education institutions. We have leveraged the same universal design principle, which we have used throughout our newest TAO products to ensure accessibility and responsiveness. We want to make sure to guarantee that our platform is usable by everyone, regardless of their technical expertise or regardless of their physical abilities. At the same time, what we wanted to do with our portal, and hopefully we also achieve that, is to make it more appealing to teachers so that they can organize their own activities and their own rostering information. Some of the other things that we were looking for with our portal was to commodify some of the features from TAO, which were, historically speaking, they were a bit hidden behind some technical interfaces like LTI or behind various APIs, which made them a bit more difficult to reach by everyone. So because of that, we wanted to bring them all of them in the eye of the users, bring them all in our portal user interface. And now we have features like test review or monitoring, advanced proctoring, dry run for our deliveries, even the rostering and importing and exporting data out of the platform. All of that can be triggered or can be accessed from TAO Portal UI. So yeah, we are really happy with how TAO Portal turned out and by its adoption. and we are welcoming your feedback on it as our users. Now, one of our main focus as well in the last year was to close the circle on the assessment cycle, if you want, by providing some meaningful reports at the end of the assessment cycle. And we wanted to target with those reports our main audience, which is our teachers, test administrators, students. So they will have access to meaningful information about how the session went. And we have introduced for that several new built-in reports, such as the session report, aimed primarily at our teachers or test administrators, and the individual student report, which is aimed both at our teachers, but also towards our students. So on the right side of the screen, you can see the session report for our teachers. There, the teacher can access different information about the session, such as the timeline of that session, so when it was scheduled to be executed, who is assigned to that session, how many test takers are assigned to that session, the average time that they spent answering that session, as well as other information like the average score. Then you can see in a more graphical manner things like how many students submitted that session, how many started the session but did not manage to submit it by the end of the session for various reasons, or how many of them totally skipped that session. Maybe they were absent when that session was online, as well as how many of them passed the session or failed that session. And then we can see a global score distribution of everyone who attended that session, so that the teacher can see where what were the scores for their students. And finally, if the test had some categories defined, and as a reminder for those that are not familiar with what categories are, you can define as part of a test definition different categories that are actually measuring the learning outcome in various areas. They can be something like, I don't know, grammar or reading or English comprehension or any other learning outcome that you want to measure. So if those categories are defined in the test, then the report will also present meaningful information about the score distribution among those categories for that test. So a test can have any number of categories, and then you will see in the report also the score distribution for all of those categories. Lastly, on this report, we also have, of course, the test taker performance or the student performance, both the score as a bar graph, as you see there, but also the outcome if they passed or failed that assessment. That is, of course, based on the assumption that the test has a cut score defined on it. So that's how you can get that information about a pass or a fail for a student by defining a cut score in the test. Then on the middle, you can see also another type of report, which is an individual report for a student. This time, it can have different information depending on who the audience is. So the teacher may see a bit more information than the student, but the details may vary, but the main concept is the same, and the high-level data is the same. So you will see, if of course, if the student passed or failed, their score. You can see how many responses they got correct or incorrect, or maybe partially correct, how many they skipped. You can see for each individual question the correctness as well as the score. You can jump right into that question in the test review, so you can actually see right from the report what was the response of the student for that question together with the score. While the teacher also has some additional details, which helps them compare the performance of the student with the performance of the group as an average. So that's what the teacher can see on top of the student. And then on the left side, you can see the test review, which was before TAO Portal, it was available only through LTI. So you had to trigger the launch of the test review by using the LTI protocol. Now it's part of the platform, part of TAO Portal. And it enables both the student and the teacher to see the responses of the student, the scores as well, if they passed or failed, all of those things. So all of those are now part of TAO Portal, and they are tightly integrated together. Then something else that we have added as well as part of TAO Portal is hierarchy management. What is hierarchy management? Well, quite often users and group management go beyond just creating the users, maybe assigning the users into different groups, assigning sessions to those groups. Typically, that works with just this flat way of managing users and groups in smaller organizations. But as soon as the organizations start to scale up, or we are talking about larger organizations from the get-go, we often need a more flexible management possibility, one that mimics the organizational structure. You can imagine, for instance, the organizational structure of a district, for instance, in US or even a country in Europe, where you may want to organize multiple schools on a hierarchy, or maybe even organize multiple schools in a geographical location as another level in the hierarchy. And then under those schools, you may have departments, and under those departments, you may have classrooms and so on. So with the hierarchy management, we bring that ability to organize and set up the organization structure in TAO Portal. We allow administrators to actually add users and groups to any level of that organization, which then translates also into the visibility of the data. So a user that is assigned to one of the level in that organization will not have access to another level that is beyond their current level, above their current level, or at a completely different level in the hierarchy. So it also helps with data segregation and data security in general. This can be set up easily from the UI or through the use of CSV import. Of course, when we are talking about large organizations, it may be a better idea to actually bulk import all the users and assign them to the proper place rather than create them one by one in the UI. But both options are valid. And I have mentioned also a bit before our universal design principles. What I can say is that despite the fact that TAO evolved a lot over the years, something that didn't change that much, or we even emphasize it more nowadays, is our belief in making our platform accessible and fair for all students. So our goal was always to allow everyone, to ensure that everyone has an equal chance to succeed. And in order to achieve that, we have designed new tools quite recently to support students with disabilities or different learning needs. Those tools, which we call accommodation tools or accessibility tools, include the ability to zoom in or out the page so that you can better see the contents. Also, the ability to have contrast themes, so you can change the theme with something that offers a better contrast when needed. Also apply different text adjustments like changing the font, changing the size of the font, using different height or different spacing between the lines, all of those things, and applying some changes to the mouse cursor as well to make it more visible. All of that can be easily configured by the test administrator at the session level within TAO portal, so they can configure that when needed and for whom they need to enable it. And of course, it improves the inclusivity because it ensures that all test takers, including those with visual or auditory or cognitive impairments, can participate effectively into the assessment. Of course, it's compliant with the accessibility standards that we are striving to comply with, like WCAG 2.2, AA, and it complies also with various legal requirements throughout the world, in US, in Europe, in Asia, in all over the world. So yeah, those are just a few ways of how we are trying to make TAO even more accessible than before. And there are many other things that we have done for the lack of enough time to go through all of them. I will not go in detail for every single one, but there are a few that are worth mentioning. Like we have introduced quite recently early access to beta features available to all users through opt-in in TAO portal. If you were here yesterday on the sessions that were presented yesterday, some of those beta features were also mentioned, for instance, by Dr. Anthony Banners from the New York City Department of Education, like the batteries or the CSV import for users and groups, the CSV results export, so you can export all of the results for a particular session in a CSV format so that you can do any kind of manipulation afterwards or post-processing of the scores of the results. Also custom reports, all of those are available to our users as beta features, so take them with a grain of salt. Some things here and there may not work exactly how you would expect, but with your feedback, we are here to improve that. And then also something really important is that we have added more and more languages to TAO, and not only languages, also new dialects to TAO. So now we support languages like Japanese, Portuguese, and Portuguese Brazilian as well, French, Spanish, and Valencian as well, Norwegian with both Bokmal and Ninorks, Lithuanian, Dutch, Arabic, German, or Italian. So you can see that besides the English language, which was kind of always there, we have added in time also other languages. And we are also reaching out to you for supporting us in getting TAO translated in even more languages. Feel free to scan the QR code on the screen to actually reach out to a form where you can fill that in order to let us know that you may be available to help us translate TAO into more languages. We are using a tool called Crowdin, which provides easy translation to other languages. And then some other things that we have done recently is we have introduced an experimental AI item and test generation. Of course, we have to do something with AI. AI is the hype of the last year since OpenAI introduced ChatGPT. So we are playing with that idea, and we are leveraging the currently available large language models, particularly in this instance, the one from OpenAI, to allow teachers to easily generate their own content. So the teachers, by using this tool, which I think it will be also presented in a bit more detail later today, can fill in some preliminary information like, I don't know, the expected difficulty level, or the subject that they want to cover, or the objective of the test, the grade of the students, the topic to address. And based on those various inputs that the teacher may provide, the platform will generate either a question or a set of questions for an entire test by using AI. So yeah, it's a new way of boosting creativity or shortening the time needed to create questions, which we are experimenting with, and stay tuned for even more on that in the near future. And then also as a preview of one of the sessions that will follow later today, it's worth mentioning that we have introduced an offline version of TAO, meaning a way of deploying TAO on your premise or on a local network, so without access to the internet. My colleague Sergey will walk you through that into more details a bit later today. But what's worth noting here is that this version is actually bringing more power and more flexibility to how assessments can be done. Because up until now, in order to take online assessments, of course, you would need access to the internet. But we know that there are so many situations when internet connectivity may be limited or unreliable, and then you need an alternative. And the offline version of TAO would provide that alternative. And lastly, we have added support for new PCIs. And for those of you that are not familiar with the term, so PCI come from Portable Custom Interaction, and it's a way to create interactive, customizable assessment items or interactions, actually, that allow you to create richer or more engaging test content. They are basically, technically speaking, they are HTML and JavaScript and CSS applications or mini applications that can be embedded in TAO and act as an interaction and capture responses and be able to score those as any other interaction. We have integrated recently the GeoGebra PCI, which is a nice example of how we are leveraging open source projects, because GeoGebra PCI was developed by someone that is not working at OIT. It was developed by Jean-Philippe Rivière and then published as an open source project, which allowed us also to integrate it into TAO. So with this PCI, you can use any project on GeoGebra for any kind of skill assessment of your students, like in science or in math. There are so many different projects available on GeoGebra that can be used with this PCI in order to assess the skills of the student, or in order to allow the students to practice in a graphical and interactive way with different topics. And then we also introduced the lock PCI, which allows the author to pause the execution of a test until a password is introduced. So it can be used for various scenarios, maybe to allow everyone to start at the same time a second part of the test. That's one use case for this, but there are more use cases. And we have also introduced the Likert PCI, which was traditionally available before as well, but now we have made it fully compatible with the PCI standard coming from one EdTech or formerly IMS. So now it can work as well in TAO Advanced and when using all of the new products from TAO. Of course, the main benefit of using the Likert PCI is to provide the students with a way to answer maybe a survey and answer that on a Likert scale. So starting from, I don't know, 1 to 5 or from bad to good or to excellent, those kind of scales can be now introduced in TAO and the answers can be collected for psychometric analysis. So yeah, that's all about the past or the recent past, the last year, what we have been busy doing in the last year. You see that we have made quite good progress over the year, and we have implemented new features and enhancements and even launched a new product like TAO Portal, but we are not stopping there. So now let's see what the future holds and what we will be releasing quite soon to TAO. One thing that we will be releasing soon is the ability of finding the usage of items in tests or in sessions. So we are aware that managing a never increasing item bank can prove quite challenging. You may find yourself in situations where you have a lot of items there and you don't know exactly where those items are used. If you change one item, how many other tests will be affected because you have changed that item. And for that particular scenario, we have implemented this functionality, which allows you as an author to go to any item in the bank, in the item bank, and see where that item is used, in which tests it is used, in which published sessions it is used. You can freely go to any of those tests right from this screen on the right. So it provides you with more insights into how the items are used and how exposed your items are. So yeah, we are pretty excited about releasing this in the coming months. Stay tuned for that. And a bit related to that topic of knowing where your items are used, we will also bring the capability of knowing how your item performs. So not only how where they are used, but also how they perform. And we are introducing the item statistics, which is a feature that will evolve in time. So we are starting with a set of metrics, but will evolve to have maybe other metrics in the future, also based on your feedback. We will start with some statistics that are coming more from the classical test theory. And you can see there some information about the difficulty of the item or the discrimination. So those are calculated metrics that are done for all the executions of that item. So on all the tests that include that item and on all the deliveries and sessions that include those items, they are calculated and then reflected back onto the item so that you know how that item performs, and maybe you will apply some changes in the future to increase its performance. Besides those performance statistics, we have also other numbers like the number of executions, how many times it was executed in a test, or how many times did the students answered correctly this item or incorrectly or skipped. And you can imagine that, for instance, if you have a very high number of skipped, the metric of skipped item is very high, that can raise some questions for you as an author. Maybe there are some things in that question which are not clear enough for the students, and that's why they are unable to answer either correctly or incorrectly to it. So yeah, all of that is to help the author to improve how the item is perceived by the students, and how the item will eventually measure the performance of the students. Now, speaking about students, this next feature is targeting mainly them, so mainly the test takers, by introducing email notifications for various events that may be happening. Like if a teacher creates a session and they assign test takers to that session, at that moment, the test takers can be notified that they have been assigned to a session, and they will know when that session is scheduled for and all of those things. So they are better prepared to take that session, and the teacher will not be required to do anything extra other than just enabling this notification. And something else that this feature can be used for is to notify the test takers when the results of the session are available. So for an automatically scored test, it may mean that right after the test is finished, the test taker can already receive a notification with their score and their performance. Of course, that can be fine-tuned. So we are planning to actually introduce also more scheduling for when those notifications will be sent. For instance, maybe you don't want the score notification to be sent as soon as every single student finishes the session, but rather at a fixed date so that everyone receives it at the same time. So all of those will be part of the configuration. It is opt-in, and also it has opt-out capability. So the student can choose if they want to receive those notifications in the future. They can unsubscribe from those notifications, but then once they have unsubscribed, they can also subscribe back to them. So we are ensuring that no unsolicited notifications are being sent. Then next, this is a feature maybe more for test administrators or for IT administrators, because we are bringing single sign-on capabilities to our cloud platform. So with single sign-on, we simplify the login process. We enhance the security, we improve the user experience, we allow an organization to use an already existing identity provider. And you can see on the screen two such examples. So Google, for instance, Google Authentication can be one of them. We are also working with some Norwegian partners on authenticating through local government type of authentication with FEIDE, but we are open to any kind of identity provider as long as it supports some of the standards that we have implemented under the hood, like SAML. So this will probably be extended in the future with other identity providers as we receive feedback from you as our users. You can imagine that it makes things a bit easier if you are already using such an identity provider, because then you don't need to create those users again in another system like in TAO. You can leverage what you already have. Of course, it reduces fragmentation because of that, and it increases or it reduces the risk of password fatigue when users just reuse the same password across different sites. If they have a single user or a single set of credentials, then the IT administrator can also easier just enable or disable a user once they are maybe leaving the organization. They can just disable it in one single place, and it will apply to all the systems that are connected to that identity provider, including TAO. So yeah, there are a lot of benefits. I can maybe name one more, like leveraging multi-factor authentication if that comes with the used identity provider. then you can add even more security to the authentication into TAO without doing anything extra. So just using what the identity provider comes with. So yeah, we are really excited about introducing this one, and hopefully it will evolve more into the future. And now getting back to the teacher-student interactions, this is a very exciting feature that we are going to introduce soon, which is the ability to provide or to empower the teachers to support their students in their learning experience by providing them with direct feedback on the assessment. So as you can see there on the screen, for manually graded questions, the teacher or the scorer can add an overall feedback for the student for their response on a specific question. And that feedback will be presented to the student both in the test review and in their student reports. And even more than that overall feedback, the teacher or the scorer can even provide some contextual feedback to just one part of the response from the student. And even that will be presented as a contextual feedback to the students. So we think this will greatly enhance how the learning experience will happen for the students, and will allow even more interactivity between the teachers and the students. We are already planning to expand this functionality also for automatically scored questions, to also allow the teacher to provide feedback when they were not necessarily involved directly in the scoring of that question. So yeah, we are really excited to introduce this a bit later this year, and hopefully we will receive some helpful feedback from you when using it. And just to wrap up, because there are so many things that we have done and so little time, and I see Sam popping up there as a sign that I may be running a bit behind time. So I would just like to mention a few other things that are also coming soon, even though I'm not going to enter into too much detail on that. So we will have TAO trial. So the ability for anyone to explore our platform for 30 days. You already saw the QR code on most of our sessions, inviting you to join that. So that's something that we are also excited about. We are allowing anyone to play with our latest and greatest from TAO. Also, we are going to introduce public sessions for practice or for familiarization purposes, where a session can be created so that anyone can access it, even if they don't have a TAO user. No authentication will be required whatsoever, and that's for, as I said, for providing more practice or familiarization with those tests. Also, we are bringing a much needed facelift to our TAO to bring it more in line with our other products. So TAO authoring is getting a facelift really soon. And we are introducing more learning insights capabilities in the future with more reporting capabilities that offer student and group performance comparisons as well, and provide more insights for the teachers. So all of that is coming soon. Stay tuned for that. And if you thought that that is all, well, think again, because we have even more coming up in the future, even though some of those things may take a bit longer than the things I was just presenting. But we have exciting and bigger ideas for the future. So let me just give you a glimpse on what we are actually trying to do with TAO in the coming months. We want to enhance our manual scoring experience even more. We want to integrate our TAO Grader tool with the portal even more than it is already integrated. We want to bring new features to it, like double-blind scoring. So stay tuned for more powerful and more integrated manual scoring experience in the future. Also, we want to support our first-time TAO users with guided tours and instant help features so that they will be able to get up to speed quicker when using TAO. So that's also coming in the near future. Then ad hoc sessions. With ad hoc sessions, we are planning to minimize the friction for test administrators when creating assessment sessions by not requiring to do any kind of rostering while assigning people to the sessions, by assigning students to the sessions. It can be as easy as creating a session, sending a link to any group of people, and then they can join that session. So you can already see how this will pan out with things like more, let's say, where more formal rostering is needed for higher stakes exams, where we have TAO portal and with all that rostering capabilities. But then we have at the other extreme, the public sessions, where you don't need any rostering at all or any authentication. And somewhere in between, we will have this capability of creating ad hoc sessions. And then we want to expand on our reporting capabilities by adding even more customizable reporting capabilities. We want to deliver more insights and also allow the users to customize, to tailor their reports to meet their specific needs or preferences. For day-to-day classroom activities, we want to make it even more teacher-friendly. We want to enhance the productivity with simpler and more intuitive tools because we recognize the need of increased ease of use, especially when dealing with daily classroom activities, when you don't have actually that much time to go into preparation for all of the assessment activities. And lastly, we also want to add more customization. So you see this word getting more and more present in what we are trying to build. So we want to bring more customization also to test administrators so that they can customize the whole TAO experience as they would like. So we want to make the whole TAO experience more flexible so that everyone can tailor it to their needs. And yeah, this is just the beginning. We have so many other features coming in the pipeline. I will not mention them all, but stay tuned as you see there on screen. Stay tuned for even more things coming up in the future. And yeah, with that, I conclude here. And I don't know, Sam, if we have any comments or questions, please help me out with that because I was not able to also follow up on the comments and questions.
Of course. Yeah, so one of the questions that we have, and we do still have a few minutes for questions before our next session, and thank you for that presentation and look at the roadmap. One of the questions, and we did see a little bit about what's coming next. I saw something about SSO integration. So one of the questions is kind of what is the expected timeline, or is it already implemented, and can TAO Ignite users use it?
Yeah, so everything that you saw there with the coming soon badge is actually almost done. So it will be released quite soon in the coming months, in 1 or 2 months at most. So those will be part of the platform quite soon, including things like the single sign-on with maybe Google as the first candidate for an identity provider. Of course, it will require some configuration. So we will have to work together with whoever wants to enable that functionality, but it will be there quite soon.
And then question, is the offline, is that an enterprise feature or is that, yeah, great.
Yes, indeed. I mean, that's more of an enterprise feature because it requires also a lot of customization behind. There is some synchronization that will happen between the online instance and the offline instance. I think you will definitely hear more from the upcoming presentation from Sergey on that. But yeah, for now, that is an enterprise functionality, and we are thinking at ways to bring that even to our other Ignite users.
Awesome.
So thank you everyone for having me. I have the pleasure of talking to you about Click Learning, what we do to change little lives for big impact, and how we use TAO as part of our strategy to understand impact. So I thought I should start with setting the scene for why Click Learning exists. So across the world, more and more children have access to education, but they're not always learning. So they're in school, but not really learning, and we call this learning poverty. South Africa is no exception. And if I can just give you a few stats, we find that in grade 4, 81% of children can't read. By grade 5, 63% of learners have no basic mathematical knowledge. And this gets complicated because South Africa is a very multilingual country where learners are effectively learning in more than 2 languages, moving from a very familiar language from grades 1 to 3 into English from grade 4. And what we see is that these weak foundations compound throughout the system, leading to poor outcomes in later grades. And this is one of the contributing factors to high youth unemployment that plagues our country. Next slide, please. We have data from the Progress in International Reading and Literacy study, where other researchers have plotted if South Africa continues improving at the rate that it is, it would take 86 years for all our 10-year-olds to be able to read for meaning. And so we need significant reform to make sure that children have basic literacy to open doors for their futures. Next slide, please. And this is where Click Learning comes in. Our mission is to equip learners with foundational literacy, numeracy, and digital skills that are necessary to build sustainable livelihoods in the future. How do we do this? So number one, we use educational technology. The first step is providing the vital infrastructure to set up computer labs. So we go into under-resourced schools. There's not a lot of access to even general technology or connectivity. We equip the classroom with hardware, connectivity, and backup power because sometimes we don't even have electricity. We then provide the essential human resources, which in this case are lab facilitators, thereby addressing the youth unemployment. We train these facilitators not only to use to support learning in the computer labs, but they also do skills development so that they can have a more sustainable future after their time with us. And then what research tells us is it's actually not enough just to provide this hardware or to create the context of learning. You actually need to support learning itself. And so we provide top-notch digital learning programs. As Samantha mentioned, this is digital personalized learning software that supports both literacy and numeracy learning. And so it meets the learner where they are at. Given the large gaps in achievement and lack of learning that takes place in schools, we often find that learners are multiple grades behind where they should be. And so these apps, through using adaptive tools, realize where the learners are and give them instruction at the level where they're at, and they can work through them at their own pace. I'm very happy to note that these apps are not developed by Click Learning. They've been developed elsewhere. And we trial them and pilot them in our context to check that they are appropriate for our learners and meet the hardware requirements that we have. Next slide, please. And I'm very happy to report that we've been able to do this at quite a large scale. So that's more than 300 schools in 4 out of the 9 provinces in South Africa, almost 240,000 learners doing literacy, almost 50,000 doing numeracy. And if we counted all the devices, including laptops and tablets, that's over 20,000 that are currently in use. And this is sometimes more than some universities have in the country. Next slide, please. And I really wanted you to see what does it actually look like, these computer labs that we set up. And so here we have a learner at a school. You can see the computer that's been provided in the computer lab. There's a lot of happy learning. Children are very motivated to engage with the software because it's neither too easy nor too difficult. There's games within it. Children really love to be in the computer labs, and our facilitators are really a key part of that by making the lab a fun place of learning. And we get great support from teachers and schools to send their learners to these computer labs. And so it's just this great community of learning that really excites me and gets me up in the morning. Thank you. Next slide, please. And today I'm actually going to show you a few of our results about the kind of impact that we're seeing on learning. But before I get there, I wanted to just highlight that Click Learning is a data-driven organization. In whatever we do, we focus on what the data is telling us and use that to inform our implementation. So much so that last year we launched a sandbox in over 55 schools, where we're trialing out different products for literacy and numeracy to understand which products work for which children and under what circumstances. You can move to the next slide. And so because I've now mentioned the scale at which we work, you can imagine that doing pen and paper assessments is just not going to cut it. These schools are distributed across the country, some in quite rural areas. And so TAO is a key part of us understanding our impact. The 3 questions that I say are really top of mind for us at the moment is thinking about whether time on the apps does improve children's learning. I won't make you wait for long. The answer is yes, it does. In the data we get from our sandbox, we'll be exploring this question of what EdTech products work for whom and in what circumstances. And then also in that sandbox, we're exploring how increasing the time per week impacts learner outcomes, really understanding if that exponentially increases outcomes or whether it's a simple doubling. You can go to the next slide. And so, as I mentioned, TAO is key to us understanding this impact. We deploy our online assessments through our own portal, and so there's good integration into that. For us, we use our portal, so we have the single sign-on from the Click Learning portal. We find that the tests are quite accessible. They look beautiful. The learners find it very easy to complete. So even when we're looking at grade R, which is before formal schooling, we even find that learners at that age are able to complete the digital assessments. I think what's really impressive is the scalable volumes of test completions that we can handle. So we do have a lot of learners, 200,000 or even more than that. And when we kick off test sessions, we can have up to 20,000 learners starting a test on the same day. Most of them will finish on the same day, but some of them can complete it over multiple sessions. And so it's quite flexible for us. On the test development side, we find it quite easy to generate items and load content into different tests to deploy. And I was very excited to hear about the new developments that are coming soon. You can go to the next slide, please. So I would like to use the rest of the time I have with you today to take you through some of our results. I'll just be looking at literacy specifically in today's presentation. We have 3 assessments, which is the table on the left, which assesses alphabetic knowledge. We've got a Foundations of Literacy quiz and then a comprehension specific quiz. We also have numeracy assessments, but as I said, today I'm not going to be looking at that. And then if you just press the next button again, last year, over 8 weeks, we had over 500,000 quiz completions because some learners do more than one quiz. So we were very happy with this. I think the completion rate was over 80% of our learners. And so this just speaks to how TAO is able to work in our specific context in our computer labs that we've set up. And now the part that I'm very excited about is to show you how using TAO and the data we're able to gather through the digital assessments, we can understand the impact that we have. And so if Sam can take us to the next slide. This is a quick insight on our alphabetic knowledge. Each group of bars is a grade. Grade R is the grade before formal schooling. Then you have grade 1 and grade 2. What it's showing you is the percent of learners meeting our letter sounds benchmark, and the colors refer to how much time they've spent on the EdTech product. What you can see, the key finding here is that when learners spend more time on the product, they know more letter sounds. And so what we're seeing is that the time that learners are spending is having an impact, and more time is better. I also mentioned that in our sandbox, we're currently exploring how doubling the amount of time a week may have a different impact. So on this slide, it's 1 hour a week that learners are in session. And if you go to the next slide, this shows that when we double the time to 2 hours per week, which is the dark navy bar, we see almost 20% more learners who are able to meet the benchmark. And this data from our sandbox is very exciting for us because it shows that the time that those learners are spending in the lab is really helping them gain the knowledge that they need to move on to more complicated literacy skills, such as reading comprehension, which is what we actually care about. And so because our sandbox launched only last year, mid-year, we're really looking forward to this year's results where learners have been on the programs from earlier on in the year. And so they had a much longer time to be exposed to those products. Next slide, please. And of course, the thing we really care about is that learners can actually understand what they read. And so here I looked at the growth in reading comprehension for the same learner from their time in grade 1 to grade 2. And the different colors refer to how much time they spent on the program in 2023, which is last year. And I just ask you to zoom into where that dark blue arrow is and the dark navy line. You'll see that even though those learners started from a lower level in grade 1, their growth is much faster than learners who don't meet our target time. So we want all learners to spend at least 18 hours on the product if they're doing 1 hour a week. And we see very positive results that spending more time on the products actually increases the learning relative to learners who spend less time on the products. So we're seeing that the time that learners are spending on those programs is really boosting their reading comprehension. And we're really looking forward now to this next round of data collection in September, where we have the same learners and we'll see where they ended up in grade 3. Next slide, please. And this is something I'm very, very excited about. So you just all heard about the offline abilities of TAO. So last year, before that was even a possibility, we actually used digital assessments in schools that we do not have a program in. We brought our own connectivity, our own facilitators. We set up a classroom from scratch in about 30 minutes. And we were able to assess 2,485 learners in these schools. These schools are our control schools where we will compare progress of these learners to learners in our sandbox to really understand if access to these EdTech programs is more effective than not having any access at all. And so the point that I'm making here is that TAO made it quite simple for us to create a kind of mobile lab in a school in one day and assess over 100 learners in that day. We found that the integration was quite seamless with our portal, and since we had the connectivity, because we planned ahead, we were able to administer those assessments. The thing here that I would like to mention is obviously learners have varied experience with digital assessments. And so we included a facilitating practice question before the assessment, where we just took learners, this was actually some items in the test before the test began, just to kind of show them, you know, this is how you answer a question, this is how you click the next button, this is how you replay the instruction. And if you click next, you'll see our results comparing our treatment to our control just in one group. If you just look at bars that are the same color, you'll notice that those means are very similar. And so what this shows us is that the learners in these control schools who had never used digital tools before were quite able to complete the assessment and got very similar scores to our treatment schools before they had started using EdTech. And so this just shows us that these digital assessments, they don't only have to be used in places that have a lot of exposure to technology or computer labs. With a little bit of facilitation, even learners with limited digital experience can complete these assessments if you design the assessment appropriately. If you go to the next slide, please. And so looking ahead, we always have a lot of work to do. And realizing that with the appropriate training and understanding of how TAO can be used for our purposes, we can start moving into rapid A/B testing of different implementation modalities. We now have trained a team internally that can develop these assessments and kind of deploy them on the ground quite quickly. And so that can help us generate rapid insights. I'm very excited to implement an assessment with multi-stage adaptation. As you saw from the introduction section, even learners in our programs have a large variation in their skills. So even within the same grade, you might have learners that can't read and some that can read very well. And given that we want to limit how much time learners spend on assessment, we'd like to include multi-stage testing so that only the learners that can read really well get a more difficult next question or text that they have to answer. This also helps us understand the variation in scores. And as part of our sandbox, we'll be assessing the learners in non-EdTech schools for at least another 2 rounds. Our next one will be in August and September. So we're looking forward to seeing, now that we've done it once, how it can be made more efficient. And a real pie in the sky idea is thinking about how we can report this information back to the schools that we work with so that they can use this information in their teaching or their assessment scores. So I think I went a little bit too fast there, Samantha. I don't know what my timing is like, but that's quick learning. That's what we do. That's how we use TAO. And I'm very happy to answer questions if there are any.
Yeah, it looks like we do have a few questions, actually. So from one of the questions that had come up, sorry, I was just looking. So with teachers' initial reaction, did you face any pushback from any teachers, or was there any sort of kind of work you had to do to get buy-in across these schools?
I'm going to answer the question in 2 ways. The first one is buy-in in general for us working in the school. So we do a lot of relationship management with schools and only going to those that have expressed interest to be part of the program. Given that it is donor funded and there's limited funds, makes sense to go into schools that really want us there. And then our my colleagues, I really manage those relationships. We take teachers through how the products work. We encourage them to come to the computer labs. And we even have one project going on at the moment where we're using those same applications to support teachers' content knowledge development, which is pretty exciting. When it comes to the e-quiz itself, our digital assessments, we call them e-quizzes. We don't have a lot of teacher pushback because at the moment, the data we collect is for Click Learning's purposes. It is not used punitively to say, oh, learners are not doing well or anything like that. And we do time our digital assessments such that it minimizes disruption for teachers, especially at the end of the year when there's the end of school exams. So there's a lot of just thinking operationally through how to minimize those pain points.
Thank you, Samantha. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen now. Oh, might have a slight technical issue. Luckily, we have a few minutes in advance on the schedule. So
No worries. I can share it as well if you would like.
I need to share it actually. I will be right back.
Yeah, so while we wait to get started, if anyone else has any additional comments or anything they'd like to make, I see this comment about Brazil, so one of our team members will follow up with you. And this session, yeah, we're really excited about to get some hands-on tech tips, really dive into the product, showcase some of the things that Christoph, as the lead business analyst, he has, he's really deep into the product and has all of the knowledge to share for becoming a power user. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, so luckily you can see my screen probably.
Yeah. Looks good.
Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for being there, so many of you. I will be showing this. I think it's the third time that we are doing those sessions, those end-on session tech tips in TAO Days. 2 years ago, Patrick and I did some explanation on how to provide feedback for the student at the test level immediately after the test session is over. We also discussed about LMS integration. Last year, Sarah and Andre did a great session on best practices on how to organize the item bank and also how to generate category scores in some tests. And today, what I want to explore is actually how to exclude some items from a test. And this is really just an excuse to show some maybe more advanced functionality of TAO that you might not know, so that you can learn about those and apply them into your own use cases. So what do we mean by excluding items from a test? Usually we mean one of those two things. We don't want them to impact the overall test score, right? And we probably also want to have separate result data flow when comes the time to analyze the data collection. Some common reason to have those item exclusion, practice item. Sometimes you will have at the beginning of the test some items that are used for the test taker to get familiar with the platform. Of course, we don't want those items to be scored and to influence the outcome of the test. And another very common reason to exclude items from a test is when you have already calibrated items that you are going to use to measure whatever learning outcome your test is set to measure. You might also include in the test some items that are not calibrated, and for which you don't want to run a field trial, separate field trial, and then you will use the main data collection to do the field testing for those items as well. And of course, we also don't want their score to be taken into account into the overall test score. And we probably want to also analyze the results separately for those items. So for this session, I created a sample test in TAO, which is composed of 9 items and separated in 2 sections. The first section has 2 practice items, and the second section has 5, I will maybe make that a bit bigger, 5 items, 7 items, sorry, 5 of which are already calibrated items that you can use for learning outcome measurement, and 2 of them are items still to be piloted. So by default, having those 9 items, which by the way are all identical, they are all composed of a single interaction, which is a choice interaction, which, if given a correct answer, will produce a score of 1 or 0 otherwise, which means that by default, my test is going to generate an achieved score over a total possible achievable score of 9. And this is what we will get as outcome variable in this test. I will get the achieved score by the test taker in score total, the maximum achievable score in max score total max, and the ratio, which is the first one divided by the second one. So that's what we get by default. What I aim to achieve in this session is actually not a score over 9, but a score over 5, which will only take into account the calibrated item. So how are we going to achieve this? There are 2 strategies that I want to show today. And one will be specific to the practice item, for which we can just disable the scoring altogether. In QTI terms, we call that the response processing, which is a process in which a response given by a student is transformed into a score. And how do you disable this computation? It's very easy. So you just reach your item in TAO authoring. In the response mode of this interaction. And actually, I prepared that before the session, so it's already set. By default, you will have match correct, right? But you just select none, and that will disable the response processing altogether for this item. Meaning that no score variable is going to be created for this specific item. So if I do that for my 2 practice items, which again is actually already done, I'm already halfway in what I'm trying to achieve here, because my test is going to produce a score not over 9, but over 7, because those items here do not generate any score. So that's okay for practice item, because you don't really care about the score of those items. For items that are going into field trial, into calibration, it's not suitable way of doing it, because you actually need the correctness of the item. You need to know what is the score, the maximum score, if the test taker was correct or not. And those are data without which you cannot do the calibration. So we can use another feature of TAO test assembly for this, which is called item weighting. So an item weight is basically how much this item is going to contribute to the overall test score. By default, in TAO, they will contribute equally. Okay. So another way of saying that is that all my item here, the test score will be equal to the sum of all those items, individual items. So let's see how we can tweak that with some weighting capabilities. So I'm just going first to declare a weighting scheme at the test scoring level. And now I'm going for each item to declare their respective weight. So for the actual item which I care about the scoring to be reflected in the overall test score, I will set a weight of 1. This will be the case for all already calibrated items. When I reached an item that is being piloted, I will add a weight of 0. And this is going to effectively exclude the item score from the overall test score, because this is just a multiplier, right? So we'll finish that on all items. And for the practice item, it doesn't really matter because they don't produce any score. You can just leave them out completely of the weighting scheme, or set any weight that you want, but really it doesn't matter. And what this is doing at the test level outcome, so before that we had 3 variables only. Now we have, for each variable, we have the weighted counterpart. So the score total max weighted will be a maximum value of 5 and not 7, which is what we wanted to achieve. So let's try it actually. So I already compiled this delivery previously, so we will be ready for this session. So I'm going to log in as a test taker. I can see the session that I'm assigned to, and I'm going to take the test. So the one that was displayed in the authoring view. I will set correct responses on every item, so we are sure that if we don't get a score for that, it's because it's actually excluded from the computation and not because it's a score of 0. So first practice item, second practice item. Now I'm moving to the cognitive item. So I will go through the first 2 calibrated items. I reach my first piloted item, and so on. All right, so this is the end of the test. All right, so did it work? Good question. So how are we going to check that it worked? So previously we would use the result tab in TAO, where we can see for a given delivery execution if all the outcome declaration, all the outcome value for the specific test session. I want to use another way of accessing the result, which is also going to solve the separation that we want for the item in the result, depending on the nature of the item, which is to use what we call TAO Dynamic API. So what is the dynamic API? You all know API, you're all familiar with those endpoints that you can send the queries to, and with maybe a few parameters and get some results following a predefined scheme. We like to call our API dynamic because it provides a bit more flexibility than what usually found in those REST API. So let's demo that by an example. And to do that, I will going to use a tool Postman, which is a tool that allows sending requests to an API endpoint and getting back the result. So actually the upper part of the screen is showing where I'm going to craft the request, which endpoint I'm going to use, and what are the parameters that I'm going to use to query that endpoint, and the bottom part is going to show the response. Okay, so what is our dynamic API? So the first thing is I will, for this demo, always use a single endpoint, which I will give a parameter to, and the first parameter that I'm using here is the data store delivery result, meaning that I'm looking to get as a response the result of test session. And those are the mandatory parameters that we can input in this request. And basically it just says that I'm going to get the result 50 records per 50 records. And now I want the first set of those 50 records. So let's try doing that. And it shows at the bottom a lot of data here, because I'm just asking for delivery result without any more precision. So I will get a huge number of results from TAO, because basically any delivery result on this TAO instance is going to be returned in this response body. So how can I improve that? So, and this is where we go into the dynamic nature of the API, and that we can define the filter on the request body. So here I have two filters that are predefined. They are of type terms, meaning that I'm looking for a specific field in the response. And I can say, okay, I want only the records for which this specific field, here the delivery ID, has one of those values. Here I only have one, and it corresponds to the delivery ID that I just took as a test taker. So that is my first level of filtering. And then I will apply a second level, which is targeting a specific test taker. So here I'm filtering on the login, and I'm targeting the login that I just used as a student. So let's copy paste this bit of code in the request. And I'm getting the response here. So I'm going to look a bit more into that response. I will scroll down to the bottom of the screen below. And I have two interesting pieces of information here. So first one is the number of records that were found based on the filters above. And I have only one here, which is totally expected, because for this specific delivery and this specific login, there is only a delivery execution in the database. The second thing that I can notice here is the number of lines present in the result. So I have 1,700 of lines of data for this specific delivery execution. Give you an idea of the amount of data that we collect for each test session, and that you can use later for an analysis and to get learning insight on your testing operation. And we will see also how to reduce it to a more manageable set of data, because you don't need all the data all the time. Sometimes you are fine, depending on what you want to do with the data, with a small subset of the data that we can provide. But for now, let's move on to the top again, and let's check what we were actually trying to achieve. So here I see that I have the outcomes of the test. And it looks like I have the expected values in there. If I look at the maximum unweighted score, it has a value of 7, which was the case. And the achieved score, since I answered correctly on all items, is also 7. The weighted score is 5, and the maximum score is 5, and the achieved score is also 5. So that's what I was actually trying to achieve. And we can then conclude that we managed to exclude items for the scoring, both in disabling their scoring and both in weighting them. Okay, so let's continue exploring this API. And so, and in order to do that, I will now focus not on the delivery result level, which is the one that I used for now. I'm going to query only the item result. Okay, so whatever set of data we record every time there is an item attempt by a test taker during the execution. Meaning that I'm going to change not the endpoint, but the entity that I'm requesting. I still want to target the same subset of data, right? The delivery ID and the login. So I'm going to copy paste this filtering into the other requests that I have prepared. So let's see what we get from here. Again, I will scroll down to the bottom of the result to have a bit more information on what I got. Oops. Not sure what that is. Whatever. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down. Oh, I think I hit the trash button here. Okay, so I do have a total number of results of 9, which is absolutely expected because I have 9 items in the test. And this, every record that I get here correspond to one of those items, to the response given by the test taker to one of those items. The second thing that I noticed is that I have even more data targeting the API with this specific entity. So I have here close to 2,000 lines. And what do I have as data here? What do we put in those records? So we put the number of attempts. If there was some metadata associated to that item, you will find it here. Duration, the status, again, more metadata, the LTI parameter used to launch the test for this specific test session, etc., etc. So that's a lot of data. How do we reduce that to something that is interesting for you? So let's do it. We just add a new filtering, not filtering, but query parameter, which is called response. And I'm just going to specify the fields that make sense for me. So I might be interested in the item ID, for example. Probably the score and the max score as well. It's something that is probably useful for me. And I'm not sure why I'm doing that manually, because I had prepared actually the subset of fields that I wanted to demo. So the item ID, the score, max score, the correctness of the item, if it is correct, the duration, and the actual value, the actual choice that was selected by the test taker. So let's use copy paste, which is going to be much more efficient. And let's see what we get. So again, scrolling down to the bottom, I see that I always have 9 results, but I'm down to less than 159, which is a much more manageable data set. I can see that I have the requested field, so duration, score, item ID, the response, the maximum score, the correctness, and that I have only this subset for each individual item response. I can see, looking at the item IDs, that I have all the IDs of the item present in the test. I had set those IDs at test authoring time, so they are meaningful and we can make sense of them when looking at them now. So calibrated items, there were 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I will find the piloted item, 2 of them, and the practice item. So how do we further reduce that to the type of items that we want? Well, we already have filters here. We can just add a new filter, and we can use a whitelist or a blacklist approach, depending on how we want to proceed and what is the data that we have available and how the test was constructed. So here, this whitelist is basically going to say that I'm going to filter the list that we just saw with additional criteria on the item ID, and I'm going to take only the item ID that match one of those values here. So let's do that. I will add a new filter. So that should be, if I still know how to count, 5 results only. Scrolling down to the bottom, I do have 5 results, and they all match of IDs that all match the whitelist that was provided. If I want to do more a blacklist approach, so I want all the results minus the ones that were piloted item or practice item, and I just can add this parameter here. And actually, I'm going to do it a bit differently than what I had planned. So I'm just going to take exactly the same request and invert it. So instead of this being a whitelist, I want this to be a blacklist by adding this parameter. Meaning that in the result, I should now have 4 entries, and I do, and they correspond to the practice item and the piloted item. So that's one way of filtering the result. probably it's not the most scalable way because you have to know the IDs upfront. So we have more possibilities in the API. Different kind of filter. So for example, the prefix filter. It's basically, again, when I created this test, I used a very specific naming scheme for the IDs. And all my calibrated items follow the same naming scheme with just the last character changing. It's just an index that is incrementing. So if I use that kind of filtering, I will take all the items for which the item ID share the same prefix. And I do get my expected result, 5 results, all corresponding to the calibrated item. I can also use a wildcard filter, which is a bit more complex, not that much. So here I will look for, this basically means this asterisk symbol means any character, any number of times. Then I will look at the following string, TED, and then again, any character, any number of times. So this does not really make sense as a filter, but it's just to illustrate how it works, because if I look at all the IDs that I have available in the test, I have calibrated item ID. So this filter should match this part, right? Something before TED and something after. It should also match piloted item because it also has a TED string inside, something before and something after. So let's try that. So I'm expecting 7 results here, 5 calibrated and 5 piloted. And this is what I get. Piloted, and then calibrated. And we also have other, we can take that further, right? So for example, if I use not the asterisk, but a question mark, it will match any character one time only, instead of any character, any number of times. So here it should not change the result, basically. All right, so what can you use as a filter? Here I used basically the item ID, which is the item ID that was set at the test assembly level. Okay, so if I look back in TAO, on the test assembly screen, I have for each item an identifier that is unique in the scope of the test. So, and I use that. But as you saw in the beginning of the demo, if I remove the selection of columns that are interesting for me, I get really a lot of data for each response. And any of this data can be used as a filtering criterion. And so, for example, what else could you use? The item properties. So on the item authoring, you are able to set an identifier, the QTI ID of the item. Oh, this is the response. Okay, so the item identifier here or the item title can also be used as a filtering criteria. But you could also use data defined at the item banking level, right? So and this is where it gets especially interesting, right? So the label can also be used, but any metadata that you define on the item. So for example, here I created an item property, which is called item type with 3 possible values. And those values can be used in the filtering. So this is also why it is a dynamic API, because you can also filter with data that is dynamically defined by the user in the item bank. All right, so I think that concludes my session. I hope I'm on time. Yeah, so I hope you learned a few tricks, and thank you for your attention, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of the TAO Days session.
Thank you, Christoph, for sharing that. That was very informative. And it was great to get some of that technical knowledge into these sessions. So thank you again for participating and presenting today at TAO Days. We do have a few questions, it looks like. I just wanted to make sure that they're all covered. Let's take a look in the chat. I think Ashley has them covered, but let me just double check. Oh, we have some hands raised. That's what it was. So if you've raised your hand, please feel free to let me know if you'd like to drop your question in the chat, or I can allow to talk. I see we have Hans der Horst and Mohammed Al Masayer. So I will just start with the allow to talk, and I will start with Hans. So if you have a question that you are wanting to ask, please feel free to ask it now. You'll just have to unmute yourself. Or if not, you can please drop them into the chat, and we can get back to you with those questions as well. Because I think everyone might be muted. Okay, great. So thank you again, Christoph. It doesn't look like we have questions coming through right now, but we will, like I said, follow up if anyone has anything they'd like to share.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go get started with our next presentation. You see my colleague here, Sergey Nikolaev, has joined us. He is an engineering manager here at OAT, and he's going to be diving more into the offline solution that we had discussed earlier in Dragos's presentation. So to introduce Sergey, he, as I mentioned, is OAT's engineering manager and an experienced software engineer, focuses on distributed systems. He designs and brings to life scalable and reusable enterprise solutions, communicating the implementation steps throughout multiple teams. As a component architect, he is also responsible for solutions definitions to the business needs. Sergey has deep experience in the business side of IT products, working with customers in a business analyst position to collect their requirements and transforming general ideas into actionable items for the engineering teams. So it's my pleasure to hand it over to Sergey, and he'll walk through the latest.
Thank you, Sam. So yeah, without any further ado, let's start with that presentation of mine. Hope you can see my screen well. Maybe not, actually.
It's starting to share. If any troubles, I can always share for you as well.
Yeah, just one moment. There we go. I think that should work now.
Let's see. Why don't you try? Oh, there we go. Perfect.
There we go. Okay. Well, I did lose all my notes, but whatever. That's all because I'm not using multiple screens. Anyway, let's begin with that. So I was actually very surprised to hear TAO Offline mentioned quite a lot recently. And yeah, this is indeed one of the latest products we've been working on here at OAT. And initially, as an idea, it just occurred to us when we got our hands on the PISA project. So together with Acer, we organized the overall distribution of the TAO Offline solution among the organizations that participate in the PISA project. And that solution basically allows the organizations that either do not have access to the internet or have limited access to the internet, or maybe even require not to have any access during the assessment period of time to the internet. Yeah, they can benefit from using this solution and still have the full TAO Advanced experience for the students. So yeah, that about covers why TAO Offline came to be. And for the part of what sort of features TAO Offline offers, it basically is completely integrated in terms of the data and roster information with TAO Portal. So whatever data you as an organization have in the TAO Portal system, you will have an option to take it offline. So that's the main idea. You define what piece of your data you want to take offline. And that's about it. So you, as an administrator for the data, you control what hierarchy levels your organization has. And Bragos actually mentioned that in his keynote presentation for TAO Portal. So now we actually have all these available as part of the TAO Portal UI. So you can set up your organization's hierarchy. You can define what hierarchy level your managers have access to, and distribute your TAO Offline solution between them, and be sure that they will be able to download the data that belongs to them. So as I was also saying, for the test takers, it brings the full TAO Advanced experience, no shortcomings there at all. So that includes timers, that includes any sort of PCI support, everything is there and available in full. So basically we run exactly the same application for TAO Advanced as we run in the cloud. Right, so moving further, I think we should talk a little bit more about what kind of roles actually use the TAO Offline product, right? So in order to better understand what TAO Offline is, yeah, we already briefly mentioned what administrator role is capable of. So this role is all about working with the online part of your organization, right? So you set up the organization structure, you distribute the TAO Offline to the actual venues where the assessment is going to be, and you let the synchronization managers know their credentials. And the so-called synchronization managers, they are responsible to set up the TAO Offline solution at the venue, at the school, for instance, right? Then they are able to synchronize whatever data is available to them as part of their organization data, depending again on the hierarchy level they belong to, and take it offline. So that includes user data, user credentials, roster information, deliveries themselves, and enrollments. So with that, they are able to distribute the test takers' credentials, and well, test takers are just there to actually go through the assessments. So that's about it in regards to the roles and their responsibilities. So now to a little bit more juicy part of it, I guess. So what's under the hood? So how did we actually manage to put all this experience into actually a very small distribution? So you can literally put this distribution onto a flash drive, I don't know, sail on the boat to an island, take an assessment there, bring that flash drive back to the mainland where you have the internet connection, and get all your assessments synchronized back to the cloud. So under the hood, we use, as you probably could have already guessed, a Docker compilation for all of the applications and our services. As I was already mentioning, it's literally the same code base as you have on our cloud solutions, right? Well, with the exception that it doesn't get updated as often, obviously, because you need to have your distribution of TAO Offline, well, pre-distributed for you, and we pack it as an Oracle VM VirtualBox image. So that's an open source application, and we have quite extended experience working with it. In order to build these distributions and pack them, we use Ansible build scenarios. So I wouldn't say that at this stage is completely automated, to be fair with you, but yeah, we're getting there. So it's a semi-automatic process at the moment, and that is why Dragoš was saying it's so far more of a premium solution, and not all of the Ignite customers can benefit from it straight away. So we need to do some customizations. So in terms of security, the file system is completely restricted. So you cannot, as a user of the TAO offline, you cannot access anything there. We do, however, offer web UI for system journal, so that in rare cases when we need to remotely debug a problem on the TAO offline solution, you as a TAO offline user can actually check what sort of messages you have in your journal just by using a simple web page. So for an ease of setting up the whole solution, we are using multicast DNS. That means as soon as you plug in your TAO offline instance to your host machine, and that host machine is part of some network, that virtual machine is automatically part of the same network. So it's discoverable from any other machine in the same network. So imagine you have a laptop in a classroom, you set up your TAO offline virtual machine on that laptop, and any laptop or PC or whatever that's connected to the same network or to the same Wi-Fi has access to TAO offline, so that the students can reach TAO Advanced right away. No configuration needed at all. So in order to allow the so-called synchronization managers to actually download and upload the data from into the cloud, we introduced another special application that's only distributed as part of TAO offline. It's not available anywhere else. Well, for obvious reasons, because it's only needed in the offline scenario. And that application allows us to allow the synchronization managers to use a very simplistic UI to track and download and upload the data and synchronize it with the cloud, essentially. So there's another very interesting option. It's not like presented in the UI anywhere at this stage, but yeah, we are thinking of the ways of making it more prominent, but the feature itself is there. And basically, you have an option to also fully encrypt the responses of the test takers so that they are completely private. And even when they are uploaded to the cloud, they stay encrypted. Only you, as the owner of the private key in that key pair that you use to encrypt the data, you will be able to decrypt the responses later, and nobody else will have access to the responses, including us. And that's about it on the overview of the technologies that we've been using within TAO offline. So for the data flow, which I think I already briefly-ish described, right? So we have our synchronization managers who use the synchronization UI to talk to the cloud, to download the roster information, to download the deliveries, and make them available offline. So basically, bring a piece of information from the cloud, store it locally, and make it available to the test takers. So for the test takers, the experience is, I would say, no different from taking the assessment using the cloud solution, because they will be logging in to their assessments via TAO portal, exactly the same interface, and they will be taking the assessments using TAO Advanced. Again, exactly the same interface. Well, with the exception that under the hood, we are actually storing everything locally. Nothing is at this stage requiring internet connection at all. And only when the synchronization manager decides that, okay, it's time to upload the assessment results back to the cloud, yeah, they can do that. And they can even keep the whole TAO offline instance completely offline off the grid during the time the test takers take their assessments. All right, so obviously we had to solve quite a few problems before making it possible. And obvious problems are authentication, authorization, data access control. Probably one of the bigger one is data integrity, because you have to download multiple things. You have to make sure that you downloaded the right part of that multiple thing list, right? So you have to download the deliveries, you have to download the roster information, all the user data, their credentials, all the assets of the deliveries, like images and videos, all this stuff has to be brought offline. And obviously not downloading just a single part of that whole list makes the assessment or the enrollment for the student completely broken, right? So data integrity is a key here. Right, then another potential problem might be the fact that some organizations may set up their hierarchy in the wrong way and start distributing the credentials, duplicated credentials to different schools, right? So imagine a couple of schools have copies of the TAO offline instance, right? And obviously they have different students, but they happen to have the same set of credentials simply because somebody made a mistake. And we still have to make sure that we would record the assessment from both schools in this situation, and we would be able to resolve this problem later when the data actually arrives. So we had to look into that as well. Obviously, for the synchronization manager's experience, the stability of the synchronization process is also important because they may have to deal with a really large amount of data, like, I don't know, tens of gigabytes of data, or sometimes even more, right? So what they would, I expect, what would they do is just to click a download button, for instance, I don't know, go and make some tea or coffee, just wait around for that whole thing to be completed. And for that, the whole process has to be quite stable. And of course, the UI has to be very efficient in letting know the user what's going on, right? So that they can track the progress of the synchronization, have the immediate feedback on how much was downloaded, how much is still pending, and so that they are sure that something is actually happening, right? And that the system is not frozen. And of course, performance is also very important. If the synchronization process is slow, or even worse, if the test taker's experience is slow, that would be a disaster for a school as well. Now, with that map of all the problems, let's dive a little bit deeper into each of them. So for authentication, it was quite straightforward. So we already have our identity provider in the cloud. So in our own cloud, I mean, so that's our identity provider for any users that use TAO Portal, TAO Advanced, So proctoring all these solutions use the same identity provider. And Synchronization Manager is no exception. They also belong to the organization. They are issued with the access token that allows them to work with their organization data. And as we can see further, once we solved the authentication problem, authorization was also not such a big deal because we had already the hierarchy management in place. So hierarchy management allowed us to not only segregate data on the tenant levels, right, on your organization level, but also to segregate the data within your organization, because you, again, as an organization, would probably like to have a certain school accessing only their data, right, and not the neighboring school data. So hierarchy management helps here. Then, yeah, for data access control, yeah, already sort of went through that. As I said, I lost my notes. That's why I might be talking in a bit of out of order fashion, but bear with me here, please. So hierarchies allows you not only to set up the data segregation on a, let's say, linear way, right? You can also set them up in a tree-like structure. So your synchronization manager can have access to the school data or to the regional data or to the whole country data, for example. Well, that's just an example. You can split your data and set up the tree as nested as you want it to be or as flat as you wanted it to be. So again, the jailability allows us to control and embed this data into the token itself. So they basically issue that token from the identity provider and use a single token to talk to every single API that we have in the cloud from TAO offline. Using the example of PISA while working with Acer, so that's exactly what they did, right? So they have multiple national centers. Each national center controls assessments of multiple schools, and they could issue the virtual machines with TAO offline to either the national center itself or to each individual school. And synchronization managers in these schools had access only to the relevant information for them. Right, so for data integrity, another important aspect, as I was saying, the first idea that comes in mind when talking about data integrity is to use transactional approach, and for more complex things, even saga patterns, right? But we decided to sort of reverse the approach here. And first of all, we ensured that every little step that the synchronization application is making is very atomic, right? So every step should download just a little piece of information that makes sense on its own, but doesn't introduce any dependencies for itself. So we basically build a dependency tree for all of the pieces of data and start downloading from bottom to the top. Well, that's because engineers draw trees in a reverse way, right? With the root at the very top, which is weird, but okay. So that's the idea. Every single action is atomic, right, when you do the synchronization, and you do not introduce any dependencies while synchronizing. Right, so for the application problem, as I was saying, multiple schools can potentially have the same set of test taker credentials, and that would be a problem if they start uploading the assessments back to the cloud, right? So you mentioned that the assessments would be colliding with each other and potentially overwriting the data of one another. So we solved this problem by having the TAO offline solution to generate the universal unique ID every time it is initialized. So when the TAO offline is initialized, when the test takers actually start taking the assessments, we have that universal unique ID written down to the permanent storage on TAO offline VM itself, and that VM from now on has this unique stamp on it, so that every assessment is actually unique. In the end, we would have potential overlaps, right? But we would be able to resolve them quite easily. So for the stability, again, yeah, that problem was solved in multiple iterations. So we worked closely with Acer's Q engineers. They helped us a lot in understanding what's missing, what's working, what's not working. So that was a multi-iteration approach. But in the end, the current state of the offline allows us to deal with quite flaky connections. It does not error out in this case. It will be applying an exponential backoff retry every time it fails to download a small piece of information. And you, as a synchronization manager, shouldn't be noticing that. Well, obviously, if your internet connection is bad, it will take a while, but it will work. For the Docker composition, it's not a problem at all, I would say, to sustain it in a healthy state by having each and every service monitored with Docker Compose's health checks. And we also have a dependency tree within the Docker composition that makes the dependent services unhealthy and just waits for the other ones to be up against. So every time there's a problem, they will be restarted. And since every service that has to deal with the test taker's experience is completely stateless, so it's absolutely safe to restart them any moment. Right. So this is just about the UI a little bit. As you can see, it's very, very simplistic. It literally has a single button when you just log in, has this download button, and that's it. Then you see the progress bar. As I said, you just sit and wait around for this to be completed. So building the progress bar was actually quite a challenge, I should say, because whoever had to work with progress bars before probably understands what I mean. Because actually telegraphing to the user what's about to happen is hard. You have to know how many records we are talking here about, right? You have to know the approximate rate of the download, and that depends not only on the internet connection speed, it also depends on your machine, of course, because the download process is not just about fetching the data and storing it, it's actually about publishing the deliveries as well. Because fetching and storing some pieces of data, such as credentials and rostering data, is fine. However, we decided to use QTI in order to ensure interoperable operations between the cloud and the TAO offline solution. So every task is downloaded as QTI and then unpacked and published and compiled on the TAO offline solution from scratch. So that allows us to actually work on improvements to the compiled version of the deliveries in the online without worrying about backwards compatibility with the older versions of TAO offline. And for the upload, it looks exactly the same. You get this second screen with a single upload button. You click it, you're done. As simple as that. For performance, yes, as I was saying, some data is simply cloned, right? And that's actually quite fast. And for deliveries and their publication, we had to experiment quite a bit with the number of workers, with the size of the queue, with all this stuff in order to ensure the best performance on the majority of the machines. Right, so this is a little bit more of a bit more complex picture of the same thing that you already saw, that shows every single component that's involved into the process. On the left is the cloud part, and on the right is the offline part. Well, obviously some things are amiss here, but in general, the picture is exactly like that. So in the end, you can see that all these arrows are pointing towards data store. So at the very end of your data life cycle, of your assessment life cycle, you are going to get all of the assessments available through the dynamic query API that Christoph just showed a few minutes ago, in an exactly same manner. So regardless of whether you took the assessment online or offline, your data will be available in TAO Insights, in Dynamic Query API. Yeah, you can do whatever transformations and processing of that data as you will. Now, for the optional encryption, just very briefly, because it might not be such a widespread usage feature, I would say. Yeah, so every TAO offline instance is completely empty by default. And the end users, the synchronization managers, can optionally supply their public key to the TAO offline instance so that it's stored securely there. And then when the test takers arrive and they start taking their assessments, as I was saying, every single response of theirs is encrypted with that public key. And literally nobody has access to, and cannot even have access to, that information without the private key that is yours. You didn't give it to anyone, you keep it to yourself, you download the data from Dynamic Query API or TAO Insights, and you decrypt it. So we have a special tool to do that as well. Now, for the part that I don't think got any attention lately, we have a bit of telemetry data collected during the assessments as well, and that data is available via TAO Insights, via Dynamic Query API as well. And we, as I promised, keep the same experience of TAO Advanced in offline too. So we collect that data in offline as well. So what allows us to actually apply that telemetry data again in the cloud is the fact that we have all our data for data store collected in an event-driven manner. So when the new assessment is arriving from the offline solution, we can just replay the events that were stored as part of this assessment, and we will have them in data store in Dynamic Query API right away. So what do we actually store? So I think we have like 3 main categories for this data. We may have more at this stage, but these are the 3 main ones. So every test run or lifecycle event, such as navigation, opening the item and stuff like that, is recorded. Every interaction event, such as choosing the response, changing the typing the response, I don't know, dragging the slider on the QTO slider interaction, all this stuff is recorded. And then the accessibility tools that were presented by Dragoš earlier, they also emit such events, and you should be able to understand a lot better of what kind of interactions and what kind of tools are making an actual impact to the test taker's experience from this data. So now you are able to collect this data not only online, but offline as well. So yeah, I think we went through that already. All the navigation events, submission events, they are recorded. Yes, you also are getting information about the screen resolution, the user agent. And this is how it approximately looks like. So you get this information from the dynamic query API. You know what deliver execution ID belongs to, you know what item ID was currently opened, you know what response was modified, and the metadata can actually be a lot more complex. It will depend heavily on the type of the event itself. So for interactions, yeah, we would record events such as selecting, typing, copying, and yeah, for media interactions, for instance, we would also record plain pausing and seeking events. Right, so that's about it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, let's hear them out. Thank you very much for being here and for your attention.
Great. So just diving right in, talking about campaign dress rehearsal. So it might be obvious, but why would you say it's important to prepare for a test administration?
Well, you know, just like students prepare for important tests and exams, test administrators need to be ready for major assessment events as well. Maybe even more than they're ready. When talking about complex campaigns, they involve a lot of moving parts. So a lot of things can go wrong. Some of them are under our control, some not. A good example of something that is outside the control of a test manager or test administrator is a silly example. A train is delayed, for instance, or not coming at all. So the students cannot reach that exam center. They cannot make it, right? In this situation, of course, it's not under anyone's control. The campaign team needs to focus on areas that they can control, like content creation, content validation, internal coordination, coordination of test centers, but also important to know how to react in various kind of situations, to be ready to provide workarounds, to have press communication ready, because especially during the high-stake exams, there are a lot of eyes on this event. It's a social event. It's a national event. A lot of parties are involved: the students, the parents, teachers. So yeah, it's important that the core team of the campaign knows how to react in various situations. So the goal of those preparations of a campaign preparation is to make sure that all those prerequisites are met and will allow the test takers to perform at their best during that special day. And you know, if one of the moving parts is failing, then unfortunately, as we know, the test takers' experience can be altered. They might not perform at the highest potential. And sometimes they might be forced to not take the exam for various reasons. Also, from our experience with several customers, we saw that a lot of campaigns are thoroughly prepared, but there are also opportunities to improve, especially in the process itself and the content areas. So this is why we developed and we are continuously actually improving two ideas that we have: the dress rehearsal and the content verification.
Yeah, and so we're getting into dress rehearsal. So that's kind of an interesting name to call something. So what do you mean by dress rehearsal?
Yeah, it's an interesting name indeed, but I think it's kind of perfectly summarizing what this idea is about. So we actually borrowed this term from live performances. Before a premiere, a live performance, people involved in that, they are gathering together and they are doing a full rehearsal with costumes, with props, with everything as it was a real live performance in front of the audience. So this is what we are actually doing. There are a lot of similarities, right, between a campaign and a premiere. Let's say like this. So every year, a new administration means basically new content, new students, new rules, maybe new curriculum, new challenges. Just to mention ChatGPT, and sometimes or almost always new team members in the core team of the campaign. So it's, yes, it might be like a routine from year to year, but there are a lot of things which are new. And we have observed that due to busy schedule and maybe focusing more on other areas, there is this tendency to miss the opportunity to get together and to do a complete rehearsal just before the campaign start. And in short, in a summary, during a dress rehearsal, which we are trying to keep around 2 or 3 hours long, we gather all the involved stakeholders or actors, if we want to keep the parallel with the live performance, the campaign manager, technical people, content people, communication. So anyone that is typically not really working together day to day, they get together and we simulate various scenarios, various situations that might happen during a campaign. And the main goal is to make sure that everyone in the team, in this extended team or new team, will know what to do, and especially because during a high-stake campaign, the time to solve issues is very critical. Usually the students are not allowed to retake the test the next day, for instance. So imagine for some reason you are not able to take the test or the exam, then you need to wait several months when the next session will happen, or even next year. So you miss out, entrance to university because of various causes. Again, under our control or outside our control. So it's very important in those critical moments that everyone knows who does what without questioning each other and so on. And together with the client, we create various scenarios that trying to help the team to be more resilient and efficient during these crisis situations. Again, stress or pressure comes not only from our desire. When I say we, I say our client and us equally. It's not only our desire to help the student or the students, is also the added pressure coming from the press.
Right.
So At the end of the rehearsal, we do this short retrospective and agree on certain action points that we should follow and to improve the process.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the ramifications not only for the student if they, for example, miss their ability to then go into the college entrance, but also legal ramifications for organizations too that they have to answer to. All these different test agents that you mentioned in when you're planning a dress rehearsal. So are there just some examples of like when you're bringing these test agents together, could you share any examples of, something that would be under maybe our control?
Sure. Yeah. For instance, one test center lost connectivity for some reason. So the students that are in that test center cannot do much besides panicking. So again, the core team needs to know how to react and to provide a workaround or a solution, either allowing that exam center to allow more time, for instance, or to check with the local network people to see is it like something fixable or not. Another scenario might be a single test taker cannot start the test. This can be, I don't know, they messed up for their credentials, or their machine, their laptop is not set up properly. Another one can be a test taker cannot move forward to the next item. What is going on? So yeah, we are trying to cover a bigger palette of possible situations, because depending on the situation, you have certain people that should act, right? So if you have a school, just going back to my first example, that lost connectivity, then you need to have the communication people prepared with a small public information, right? That certain school has connectivity issues. It's not from centrally. It's fully under control. We are trying to fix it. So yeah, it's depending on case by case. We are trying to create these scenarios and of course practice how we react on them.
Awesome. And how do, you may have mentioned this, but how long do these dress rehearsals typically take?
It depends. Based on our experience, we think that 2 up to 3 hours, it's a good mix. After 3 hours, because this is also typically how long a campaign day lasts. So yeah, 3, maybe 4 hours. But after that, because they're also kind of intense, it's only issues for 2 or 3 hours. The team gets tired, and it's not that efficient. We can have multiple iterations to follow up on the previous action points. So yeah, it's like 2 to 3 hours.
Sorry, that makes a lot more sense now, just seeing how it's mirrored kind of after a campaign type of, day. So it seems like this is a fun activity. Could you kind of share a little bit more about that?
It is fun, actually. So there is a lot of pressure, because we are, kind of putting this pressure on our shoulders. So it's both fun but very serious as well. So we are trying to simulate real life as much as possible. We are having a designated villain, let's say. So somebody, the bad guy in the group, trying to disrupt the normal way of things. So let's say we agree on a way of working, but out of the sudden this villain messes up everything. So it's important to exercise on how we react on unexpected things. happening. So yeah, we are not solving real situations, but we are pretending to fix issues, pretend to send notifications, pretend that we are sending press releases, things like this. So yeah, it's fun, but also pretty serious. The goal is to have the team more resilient, that those processes and agreements between the team to become a kind of routines. Because if it turns into a habit, then it's easier to react fast. And also, it helps to avoid confusion, because imagine you have somebody from a test center is complaining about something, and out of the sudden everybody jumps into that single situation. But if the second case is coming, then everybody is busy with the first. So we need to make sure that we are avoiding double work, that we are avoiding confusion, that communication noise is at the minimum, because otherwise, the situation, maybe the next one or the next one's situations can get stalled or very slow in resolving them. And again, thinking about our test takers, they are the ones that can be impacted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think it's really important that that makes a lot of sense. When you're anticipating something, you get more into a habit, even if it might not be the exact scenario that was simulated. You can get into that mindset and really take that same structure of approach to mitigating those issues and challenges, and making sure that everything kind of moves smoothly and everyone is on the same page, and all the communication. It seems like there's a lot of communication that goes into this.
It is, yeah. And it's also, as I said, these people, they are not working together usually on a day-to-day basis. They might be in various departments, in the same big organization, but in various departments, focusing on their daily tasks or their targets, their goals. So with this kind of exercise, bringing together people from various areas, kind of creates a bond, especially because it's a kind of a high pressure situation, even if it's a simulation, creates this bond, and it really gives a sense of a new team to everybody for those 2, 3, 4 weeks of administration.
Yeah, for the campaign prep. Well, that makes a lot makes a lot of sense. So thank you for sharing kind of about this idea of the dress rehearsal. How is this something our clients can benefit from? Is this something every client could benefit from of our enterprise level, or?
Certainly, I don't see why anyone can benefit from it. I would recommend reaching out to your account manager and ask for more details. This is something that we can together customize according to the needs, depending on the complexity of the campaign. All the scenarios can be focused on various areas which the campaign manager considers that they need improvement. The length of the sessions, the iterations, everything. So yeah, we can discuss with our customers, and we can agree. We can start small, and then if this makes sense for them, we can grow it in a kind of a routine year-by-year exercise.
Okay, great. Yeah. So if you are a TAO customer with large-scale, high-stakes assessment campaigns, feel free to reach out to your account manager if you would like to have a sort of dress rehearsal type simulation for your next campaign. So thank you, Jimmy, for going over that.
My pleasure.
And I know you also mentioned something about content verification in the beginning of the presentation when we first joined. Could you dive into this activity that you take on as you're preparing for a campaign?
Of course, yes. Thank you. It's something that we also observed. Before going into more details about this, I'd like to mention and to stress that OET is not responsible for the content itself. So we are responsible for providing the TAO platform, but we have zero control or responsibility over the content that is created and is going to be used during the administration. So this is up fully to our clients. However, we know really how challenging it is to create content, and especially for a high-stake campaign. It's a lot of scrutiny, so a lot of attention, a lot of scrutiny, for instance, at the level of difficulty or fairness from press, from teachers, from parents, and so on. So we know already that there is a high pressure on the authors to create the best version of the content. The content complexity typically is higher than in smaller administrations. And with all this pressure, even a small typo in a question can really create huge headaches. So yeah, it's sometimes a small typo can change the meaning of a question, and yeah, it can create a lot of discussions and debates. And on top of the content itself, the content creators, the authors, need to make sure that this content is working perfectly from the technical point of view as well. It's the media files are in the proper size and quality. The accessibility requirements are met. Other various settings are properly done. So besides the content itself, what you are putting in an exam, you as an author, you need to make sure that technically that is working properly. Being a complex process, we are trying to help by contributing with our technical expertise. So we are offering this possibility of verifying the content from a technical point of view. So not the content itself, but more like how the content behaves and runs. And again, just to make sure that I'm clear here, I must stress that we understand how important is to treat the content as top secret. So this content is really, I'm trying to avoid confidential because it's much more than confidential. It's if something is leaking, it's a disaster. So we fully understand how critical the secrecy around the content is. So when the customers are sharing the content with us, actually only a handful of colleagues can access that, and only the ones that are actually verifying it. We are creating dedicated environment, so isolated environment internally. It's pretty secure procedure.
Yeah, when you're talking about, you mentioned something about us, OAT, verifying the content. So how exactly is that done? How is the content, of someone's content, say they're bringing it into TAO, how is that for a campaign? How is that verification?
So as I said, we start with creating a dedicated environment, an isolated one. Granting access to that environment to just a handful of colleagues. And then we have basically two ways which complement each other.
Before we dive into that, just you mentioned it's an ISO certified environment. What does that mean?
It's in this case, it's isolated, so there is no integration. It's no it cannot communicate with anything. And after we finish with the verification, we just wipe everything and delete the environment. It's as simple as that. So it's as I said, more than confidential for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, I thought you had mentioned ISO because TAO is ISO certified.
It is ISO, yes. We are following ISO guidelines and requirements as well. I think this actually goes a bit above the ISO requirements.
Awesome, yeah. So yeah, sorry, go back. I didn't want to cut you off there, just going back into
no problem.
That, it's verified.
Sure. So basically, we are going into two directions. Once the environment is set up and the content is ingested into that environment. So we are working on automated verification, but also manual verification. The manual verification is done manually by the members of our quality assurance team. And they check how the content is behaving on various browsers, various devices, and of course, following various scenarios. Especially sometimes some of our customers have the policy of bring your own device, which further complicates things. So you don't have a pretty good control as a campaign manager of what kind of device the test taker is bringing to the test center. You don't know exactly what kind of browser. So we are trying to cover these kind of scenarios as much as possible. And if we identify issues with the content, we provide suggestions or workarounds for the authors to fix or to adjust the, certain items in the tests. And then the automatic verification is focused on identifying any missing settings. Again, if we remember, I was mentioning authors have a lot of pressure on their shoulders when creating content. So they might miss settings like maybe scoring settings, or I don't know, copy-paste prevention, or in some cases plagiarism checking. And also, besides settings, we have the accessibility related missing info. So I don't know, an alt text in images and things like this. I think you were wondering how long this might take, especially because the content sometimes is created pretty close to the actual campaign. So we are trying our best to speed up things. So depending on the volume of the content, it can last, from 2 days, let's say, up to several days. We can also share our findings as soon as we identify them, so that we can allow the customer to act quickly. But anyway, at the end of the verification, we are providing a report with all our findings, with our suggestions and workarounds for all of each issue that we identified. We are sharing this with the customer, and if needed, we can also have a follow-up session with the campaign team on the customer side to go through everything and see or to explain better, is this something very critical? Is this an edge case? Yeah, to better understand the context.
Mm-hmm. And how do oh, sorry, I was just going to say, it seems like this is a it's something that our clients are interested in and are want to participate in. So it was just
yes, they find this very valuable, because it also gives the test authors confidence that all those technical things are sorted out, they are covered, they have been double checked by us. And also we could see that based on our findings, the test creators themselves are getting better in creating the content. So we typically don't see the same issues from last year, which is very good. So yeah, it's also part of the learning process, let's say.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your contribution. I really appreciate that you've narrowed down the details and fit them in here. And so we also have some time for questions after the session. Please use this opportunity to ask us anything. For more information, please drop them into the chat, raise your hand into the QA. We will start the Q&A if there are any questions coming through. And if not, we will take a moment. You can also see up here, we have, again, the QR code where you can try a free trial of TAO. And as we mentioned in the session, if you are a TAO client and you're looking to, prepare a campaign dress rehearsal, you want to see how that you can make that a reality for your organization, definitely reach out to your account manager for if you have those large scale, high stakes campaigns running, it's definitely a benefit to be able to anticipate these different types of, things that might occur during a campaign.
Thank you for the invitation. I hope this information was helpful, and feel free to ask any questions now or maybe offline.
Yeah. And again, as I mentioned, we'll follow up just if you're just joining the session, or if you haven't heard me say this before, we will share an email with all of answering any questions, hoping to start a discussion around that. Okay. So we are going to go ahead and just get ready for our next session, which is going to be presented by Hans Otto Sterling, our Director of Global Assessment Solutions. So thank you again, Jimmy, for your presentation and having this discussion with me. Very eye-opening, and learned a lot of interesting things about what goes behind the scenes of a TAO campaign and all of the communication required to kick things off. Right?
Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. I will talk to you soon.
See you.
So as you can see, Hans holds a master's degree in Chinese language and literature with minors in English and German as foreign languages, and a university certificate in data science. He has 20 years of public sector experience, including consulting roles with the European Commission and NATO. His teaching career spans higher and adult education, instructing German in Taiwan and Mandarin Chinese in Germany. In the last 3 years at OAT, Hans has helped expand TAO's outreach, set up the PISA contractual assignment, and represented OAT in the UNESCO Global Education Coalition to advance digital transformation in education, supporting SDG 4. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Otto.
Thank you very much. And thanks a lot for having me here. Can you see my face as well?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. So thanks for the introduction, very kind. And maybe those who attended last year's TAO Days, they might recall that we did a little bit of a journey through countries like Morocco, Tanzania, and Nepal. And this time today, we are going to have a journey as well, but maybe not that far, but at the same time around the world as well. So it's going to be intriguing, and hope you enjoy this little journey. So let's start. And looking back to Jimmy, let's start with Norway again. And Jimmy just shared a lot of insights and experience we gathered together with our customers. And before COVID, we were happy to sign the contract with UDIR. And we started to collaborate, to develop, to refine the solution to UDIR needs. And this is one of the first maybe insights I want to share. It is so important to have a very, very close communication and collaboration, because high stakes assessment, especially when it is nationwide, is highly critical and can have a political impact, as you might all know. And this is our core business. And there's no AI included whatsoever. It's really hard, tough work on both sides, on the Ministry of Education side and on our AT side as well. This needs to follow rigorous processes, and the devil is in the detail, right? A lot can happen before and during the campaign dates. So crucial for Norway are the national exams. And what we developed for UDIR is a kind of lobby or portal with a countdown, because in Norway, all the students, and it's fair and transparent, all the students need to start at the same time. They need to be able to start within the same second. And in this portal, there is a countdown counting from 10 to 0. And after 0, all the students, they start the test. And this creates a high workload on the servers in our data centers. And another thing that we are going to share with you is that on the same platform, and that is the next insights I want to share here, is please be conservative if you set up your environments that you might want to lower the internet bandwidth for the sample tests at the same time when you run the assessment. And here you can see the peaks starting at 9 o'clock in the morning. And this is the server load we are facing with each of these national campaigns. And it's an enormous load that we are facing. You can see from the numbers, and the tests are combined, the anonymous and the not so anonymous tests. And here is what we are dedicated looking for. And these are the challenges that you might face. So please look into the performance of your data center, of your infrastructure. Another thing that I like you to consider is the item load. If you think about more than 60,000 students or test takers, they take the test at the same time. What kind of item is your very first item? Is it just an information item composed of a couple of text lines, or is it even a video, right? And if it's a video, the load on the servers will be much, much larger. And you know your students, you know your test takers, they get nervous. If something is not working, they click on updating the website, right? So within seconds, you double the workload on the servers because they want to try to upload the website again. So this is the first glance. And if you look at the dates, you will see that this is the national assessment from last year, last autumn. So let's move on. That was Norway. Let's jump to France. And here we are already in a very large scale assessment summative, and we include overseas. So additional countries that are not located directly in Europe, right? These are called France d'Outre-mer. I hope my spelling is correct. So what we did for France as well, and this is important to consider as well. Each of our countries, of our clients, they have specific needs. And for France, we developed years ago the so-called teacher and principal portal, a dedicated portal where teachers can monitor the tests, and in the end, they can even generate specific reportings for their students. What we also see, and what you need to consider if you really build or lay out your digitization strategy in computer-based testing, is that you want to add more subject matters. You want to add more grades, because what we all want to have is a very good, transparent picture of the knowledge outcome of our students in K-12, right? Because this is a foundation of policy making and policy decision within the next years. So if you build your infrastructure, look for ways to already securely improve it and scale it up. Find ways, reach out to your partners, if it's not us, that there are ways to scale up the infrastructure in order to accommodate needs for the future. So now let's dive into the dashboard here. And what we do with France is in 1 month, we conduct 5 million tests. And unlike UDIR, here you can see that this builds upon over time, right? Until it reaches really high amounts. And we are talking here about way over 100,000 concurrency, simultaneous test takers that take the test at the very same time, right? They are not necessarily starting it at the very same second, but looking at the peaks, you already see very well that, yeah, it's a nice curve, right? And you have those peaks as well during the day. Going to the next client, where we are moving quite fast, right? So first Norway, then France, and now Italy. Now we're moving to the south. With Italy, we have a long-standing contract collaboration. Not always easy. I will come to that in a moment. There are some challenges, but not within our very, very close and trustful collaboration. Italy has a very professional process in conducting field trials and the main campaigns. And Italy takes field trials at the same time as they conduct the main campaign. Why? Because they want to refine their items. They want to calibrate their items so that they are really fitting the needs within the curriculum, and they can really support the students during the test taking. Because if there are any specifics that students might not understand, the wording might not be accurate, there might be misunderstandings, this will already have an impact in the test results. And so 1 year before, the Italian colleagues already start in preparing the next year's assessment. And similar to France, we conduct 5 million tests for different grades and different subjects in 3 months of time. If you could go to the next slide. And here you see the 3 months, and you can nicely see we have high peaks as well, but the assessment lays out or builds out over time, over the 3 months. But again, it's summative. The infrastructure needs to be robust, it needs to work fine, and it needs to be protected. Why do I say protected? Please go to the next slide. Because once in a while, and Italy is a fine example for that, this is not the first attack we received this year. So during the assessment, there is a DDoS attack. And if you see, this is not coming from one country, from one of the bad countries on this planet. No, it's coming from different countries. So it's an orchestrated, dedicated attack to our infrastructure, well knowingly that there is currently a high load. But thanks to our security, the web application firewalls that we have in place, yet again, we were able to meet the challenge, and there was no disruption whatsoever during the campaign. And if some of the colleagues from Italy are joining today, they can confirm that we were able to, we have a very robust environment. We are not going to counterattack, right? Last but not least, now we are talking about worldwide assessment, and we are talking about PISA. And we are grateful to be part of this program in collaboration with a consortium led by the ACR, the Australian Council for Educational Research. And right now, we are doing the field trial. It's quite smooth right now. And if you look at the participating countries, we are talking here about over 80 countries. I think we are at 90 something. We are talking about a lot of challenges. We are talking about different languages and language variants. And all of these different, let's say the same items, but within a different language with different characters and character sets, all needs to render correctly in order to not endanger the PISA trend, right? Because the PISA outcomes are very important and they are a foundation of comparing countries. And if one of the countries feels they are, they see issues on how their students are going to conduct the assessment and be scored, they raise a word and they complain. And so one of the challenges here is to support all the different stakeholders, and we continuously participate in the different PISA, let's say, events, in the alignment events, like MBM, like PGB, together with the OECD, with our consortium partners and the countries. This is quite challenging. On top of it, in this consortium, we are collaborating with our esteemed, highly esteemed colleagues from Capstan and WestEd, and ACR provides some of the tooling as well. And to orchestrate these different toolings, right, to get to the results and everything on a robust infrastructure, that is quite challenging. And besides that, we develop for PISA an offline solution. So all that said, I would like to give you all an applause. Thanks to all our partners that support us in those campaigns. It's not only on us, but it's really this close relationship that we nurtured over years that really comes to play here. Thank you very much. Just one word to the last slide for the PISA assessment. What our colleagues developed is a very cool dashboard. And this is only one of many dashboards, but I like this one. Why? Why do I like this one? This one shows the offline solution, and it shows participation of the different countries using this offline solution, right? And here, just looking at the different columns and colors, you can see the amount of tests that are uploaded, and you can see the different countries, when they start, at what time, and we can really dive into this dashboard. This is really, really nicely done. And by the way, I shared this with the OECD colleagues, and they were, oh, wow, that's cool. Let's go to the next slide. So the insights. What are the insights? There's quite a lot, but I just wanted to share with you. This, can you go to the next slide, please? Here we go, right? And maybe I just repeat what I already said, right? And I think we are going to share this anyways. So please look at a very robust infrastructure. It's very important. Think about what happened in Italy, the DDoS attacks, right? And then conduct penetration tests for the infrastructure, or have your partner conduct these penetration tests. This is really important. We cannot afford to fail during these high-stake assessments. And I'm just repeating what Jimmy already conveyed, right? It's important to have a dedicated team, a very knowledgeable team. It's important to have knowledge sharing processes in case, one of the team members leaves the organization, but it's very important that you gain and accumulate knowledge about your solution. And it's not only our part, the TAO part, but we are talking here about an integration into a very complex infrastructure and solution stack, with most of our enterprise customers, right? And that is very interesting. What we found, for example, within PISA is that, and we are in direct contact with school administrators, that on their end, they even don't know their own infrastructure within the schools. They are not aware of any firewall configuration that might hinder or block the assessment, right? So they have external partners as well. And it's very crucial to have everything, you know, double checked before you conduct your assessments. And I think Jimmy shared this as well. Before you start any assessment, do your readiness tests on the infrastructure and do your field tests on the content. It's so important that you know that the content is really fitting your population. And recently, unfortunately, we saw that one minister had to step back because items were not refined, were not calibrated, and students had massive issues in answering these items. It was a kind of uproar in the country, and the minister and his secretary had to step back, unfortunately. Yeah, and I think capacity management, I already discussed, proactive planning is very important. And I think Jimmy mentioned maybe the war rooms. So each day, the colleagues in Norway, they assemble a war room and they are closely monitoring what is happening during the high stakes assessment. And I already talked about stakeholder communication. This is very important as well. Okay, next slide. So here are, again, a list of risks for the student during high stakes assessment. It really has an impact into their future, maybe, and it's important to still gain their trust into the overall system, into e-assessment at all. Because once the e-assessment is not running smoothly anymore, right, and there's mistrust, then this might even result in the Ministry of Education deciding against CBT and turn back to paper-based testing. And at the same time, there are challenges on the school side with teachers, and in the end with the Ministry of Education as well, right? Reputation being at the forefront. Before I close my my little presentation here, I would like to look into, okay, what about AI or generative AI? And I'm not talking about AGI, right? Artificial general intelligence. I'm just talking about ChatGPT and the potentials. And I think there are a lot. Each education event we visit now, 90% is about GAI, right? 90%. Our competitors are incorporating ChatGPT and maybe other LLMs into their workflows to assist teachers or item designers in creating items. There is a lot to come. And we as OAT, we're going to face it because it's just a tool. It's like a smartphone, right? It was a revolution 20 years ago. And I think ChatGPT will be a daily tool for within the next couple of years, right? For each and everybody. So what are we going to face, right? When we conduct assessments, for us, it's important to have a kind of lockdown system, not allowing students to either use AI assistants or even to allow them, because this might be part of the curriculum in the future, right? This is something that you can discuss in context of prompt engineering, because if AI is going to be part of our daily routine in the future, then our students need to learn how to use it as well, right? So looking at the OECD and the PISA 2029, it's on the agenda that the items in the innovative domain are going to include GAI to some extent, right? So we are going to prepare for that. At the same time, hardware vendors like Microsoft and Apple, they are already stating that they are going to make AI part of the operating system. So this is going to be a ready-made tool that allows for better, responding to within assessments, if you're able to use it or allowed to use it, and it will be part of our daily life. But our students need to cope and answer questions without AI as well. What we are going to see is increased cheating attempts as well, thanks to AI. And if you want to have your, let's say, your voice imitated, please take a look at 11 Labs. It's really fascinating what you can do with your voice and in context of assessment as well. We foresee cybersecurity risks, additional cybersecurity risks, something like DDoS attacks being even more popular, as they are not all of the large language models are locked down. So you can easily ask how to do attacks on infrastructures in the future, and even how to create the software, right? Sorry. So then I think if you talk about AI, it's always about ethical and legal issues, and whatever is going to happen, OET will conform to the EU AI Act. That is very important because there are a lot of risks outside, and we are not going to share this risk with our customers. Last but not least, it's about the human in the loop. It's about trusting what comes out of an AI system, out of an LLM, and there's no 100% trust. It's a tool, it can help you, but for quite some time, we are not going to fully trust items that are generated by an AI engine, right? So this is my view, our view on the AI with regards to high stakes assessment. And with that, I conclude my little presentation. I hope I'm still in time. Took me a bit longer than 20 minutes, Sam.
Oh, no, you're perfect.
Thank you.